And joining us on the UMA guest line is James Foster, NFL draft analyst for the 33rd team. He's a great follow on Twitter, on X there, at No Flags Film, and he's with us to chop it up and talk a little draft. James, thanks for a few minutes. Thanks for jumping in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background, man. How'd you get into the personnel evaluation biz, and how long you been doing it?
I've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years. I was in college studying chemical engineering and just started evaluating tape on the side and ended up growing it into a sustainable income. So decided to drop out and do that full time.
Is there anything that you got from studying chemical engineering that helps you as a personnel evaluator?
Absolutely not, to be honest. Yeah, it's kind of a waste of 3 years, if I'm being honest.
Well, no, never a waste. Education's never a waste. Hey, let's talk wide receivers. Why don't we start there? One of the reports today is that, Ayuk's agent says he's out for sure at least half the season, and there's speculation that the Niners are open to moving him, but there's not really a trade market for him if you believe the talk that's going around. But there's still a chance they may move him. Either way, they're going to need somebody, especially since they don't have Deebo Samuel anymore. And I asked the question, should they go for a day one or day two wide receiver? Should they look for a sleeper? It seems like most people want them to address the line of scrimmage on both sides and maybe look towards a receiver replacement maybe on day three. But let's talk about the whole group of receivers. Do you have a favorite? Some people like Matthew Golden. I've heard other people say T-Mac from Arizona. I'm kind of a Luther Burden man myself. Who's the best receiver in this group to you?
So I think Luther Burden is the best receiver in this class. I know that you see him falling out of the first round in a lot of mock drafts, and there's like football character stuff that I don't really have a ton of insight into, but purely on the field, I think he's a top 10 player in this class. Somebody that can fill that Deebo Samuel kind of yak monster role, but I think people underrate how complete of a receiver he is, and I don't think he's somebody that would be limited to a slot gadget type of role. He's a really good route runner, great deep threat, really consistent hands, just in 2023 especially cleaned up on slot fades. I think he's somebody that could be like a high-end number 2 type of receiver. I think the class as a whole is kind of lacking the top-end talent of a lot of the previous years. Luther Burden would have been my wide receiver 6 in last year's class, but I've got him as my number 1 guy this year.
Wow, that really speaks volumes as to how what this class looks like compared to past years. You said Burden's a deep threat, and I see that as well when I watch the film. What other receivers do you think also represent that kind of deep threat? Ability is, it's not every receiver can operate down the field. Burden clearly can. What other guys have that skill?
So I would say Jalen Knoll out of Iowa State, a little bit undersized, but just incredible speed and acceleration. I think somebody that can be a lot more than just a deep threat, though. Like you watch him, the way that he can sink his hips and cut off like comebacks and deep outs. Just really, really good job accelerating out of his cuts. I think I'm a big fan of Jalen Knoll. I've got him as a top 40 player in this class. I think that, somebody who I actually have like my high-end comp for him is Brandon Ayuk, is Savion Williams out of TCU. Yeah. Almost 6'4", 222 pounds. I think the best receiver after the catch in this class, they actually used him like as a true running back, giving him handoffs on like outside zone. But he's got the size, he has the contested catch ability. He can be a deep threat jump ball guy, but also really explosive out of breaks. And I think with a little bit of development, could be somebody that runs the full route tree. His thing, it's really frustrating with Savion Williams. Like, the more difficult the catch is, the more consistently he makes it. Like, if it's an acrobatic adjustment in back corner of the end zone, he's your guy. But if it's a 5-yard hitch route, his focus on those easy ones is pretty frustrating. And so I mean, that's really the thing that's holding me back from giving him a first-round grade is just some of the drop issues. But, people will make the comparisons to Quentin Johnston because they go to the same school. But, to me, Quentin Johnston just never looked natural catching the football at all. And Savion Williams just, has focus drop issues.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Quentin Johnson kind of fights the ball, where Savion Williams
exactly.
has some focus drops. It's funny too. People say, "Well, why you guys even talking Savion Williams if he has drop issues as a receiver?" Because he's 6'4", 225. He was a high school quarterback. He's a Wildcat quarterback. You can run this guy on the goal line. I mean, he's a beast. I mean, he's physical. I mean, he's got a lot of the Debo run through you traits, doesn't he?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that, even Brandon Ayuk had, I don't think quite at that level, but I remember early in his career had some focus drop issues and was able to clean that up. To me, there's a difference between, like you said, somebody that fights the ball and just doesn't look, ever look natural catching it, and somebody that has focus drop issues. Not that it's not a weakness or not a problem, but it's easier to project somebody cleaning that up.
How about the day, not necessarily the day 3 receivers, but more the day 2 group? Isaiah Bond from Texas, who transferred from Bama, who he ran a great 40 time this week at the Texas Pro Day. Emeka Egbuka, who ran primarily out of the slot at Ohio State. But, he's really polished, and you can see that he might be able to contribute right away. And then a guy like Jack Betch, we were talking about Savion Williams. TCU probably should have been even better because they had Betch and Savion, and I love Betch. I mean, what a route runner. He sets up DBs. He's got size and hands and physicality, and he's just a big-time guy. What do you think of those 3 guys, Bond and Betch and Egbuka?
So Jack Betch, my comparison for him is Jericho Cotchery. I think he's somebody that has the size and the play strength where he could play in the slot, he could play X, he could play Z. Just a hyper efficient route runner, no wasted movement in and out of breaks. Every step has a purpose, and like you said, does a great job of setting up DBs. And I think he's one of the best receivers in this class at using his physicality to his advantage at whether it's getting off press at the line of scrimmage or using a wipe technique to knock the defender's hands down at the break point and separate out of the break. So I think he's somebody that can separate. Only had 1 drop on 91 targets last year, and then he's an absolute truck after the catch. He'll contribute as a run blocker. Just a really complete receiver and one of the highest floors in this class. And then speaking of high floors, I think Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State, to me, has a really narrow range of outcomes, and they're all him being a good receiver. I don't see him being a true number 1, but somebody that I think is going to give you in that 700 to 1,000 yards a year range of production. Played pretty much exclusively in the slot at Ohio State. I don't think that he really has the elite speed and explosiveness to where I would want him, playing much outside, but I don't worry about him beating press. If you watch the Notre Dame game, he actually showed some pretty crafty releases off the line of scrimmage. I think that he has a little bit of versatility, but probably going to do his best work from the slot. And just a really technically sound route runner, doesn't drop the ball. Another really good run blocker as well. He's another player that kind of just checks every box. And then Isaiah Bond is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. He came into the year as my wide receiver 1 and a top 5 player in this class for me. I think that if we're talking just purely talent, he is one of the 3 or 4 most talented receivers in the class. And I think that he's kind of in that Jalen Waddle to Zay Flowers mold of player, speaking in terms of his upside, the way that he can be a deep threat, but then also just carve you up on comebacks and deep outs because he can really sink his hips and get in and out of breaks quickly. Doesn't have drop issues, but the play strength and catch radius to win one-on-ones down the field is kind of lacking. And then, you look at this year, he just kind of gradually, my grade lowered on him pretty much every week because he was dealing with the ankle injury, I believe. Only had 146 yards after week 5. So he wasn't that productive, wasn't really the featured guy in Texas's offense. Later in the year, that ended up becoming Matthew Golden. I was kind of expecting him to come back to school and try to put together a full season where he was healthy and could be productive. But, I still think, I think he has day one talent, but I still think a team's going to draft him mid to early day 2 because, you just can't teach the speed, the acceleration, and the sudden change of direction that he has.
Day 3 sleeper wide receiver, you got one?
Yeah, I got a few. I would say Ty Felton out of Maryland. Similar kind of like movement skills as Isaiah Bond, really explosive off the line of scrimmage, but also I think one of the best decelerators in this class, which is to me one of the most important and undervalued traits for a receiver. Like, it's great if you can run fast in a straight line, but if that's all you can do, then defenders are going to know what they need to sell out to cover. But if you can get a defender leaning downfield and then sink your hips and start stop immediately, that really puts them in a bind. And then I would also say Keandre Lambert-Smith out of Auburn. One of the last guys, I've watched 44 receivers in this class. He was one of the last guys I watched, but I ended up giving him a 4th-round grade. He's got pretty good size, ran a 4.37 at the combine. So he's got kind of that size-speed combination, but just a dominant guy at the catch point, does a great job of adjusting to the ball, framing it in the air, high pointing. I think that he can be a really productive player kind of on the vertical plane.
Yeah, it's a good one. I could name there too. We're talking to James Foster from the 33rd team about the upcoming NFL draft. And let's jump to the offensive line, because the offensive line is an area where the Niners are going to really need to find probably at least one interior player and one tackle, and maybe 2 tackles, to be honest. Do you have a favorite in the tackle group? It's funny. Bob McGinn wrote an article in the paper quoting I think a Milwaukee newspaper, quoting some NFL scouts anonymously, and they all kind of panned Campbell and Banks and Connerly, and he didn't even have great things necessarily to say about Membu. Are you a fan of the top tackles in this draft, or do you like some of the guys further down the list?
So I have Armand Membu as my top tackle. He's my 4th-ranked player overall, and it's again similar to receiver, where I don't think it compares to last year's class at all. Like, he would be my tackle 5 last year, right behind Amarius Mims. But speaks to kind of the lack of top-end talent in this class. I think Armand Membu is a really complete player. Somebody that I think would be an immediate upgrade at right tackle. He was, I think, good and consistent all year, but especially over the second half of the season, just really turned it up to another level, especially when it comes to finishing in the run game. And, needs to get a little bit quicker with his hands so that pass rushers don't get into his frame and kind of walk him back. Like, his anchor is not quite as good as you would expect for a 330-pound tackle, but yeah, he's, to me, pretty comfortably the top tackle in this class. And then Will Campbell would be my number 2, although I do view him as a guard. And that's not just an arm length thing. I mean, he's got the shortest wingspan for a tackle in combine history, so that's a pretty big concern. But I think the foot speed got kind of exposed at times, like the South Carolina matchup, Alabama, Texas A&M, Oklahoma. If he's not perfect and he's got kind of this aggressive, jump setting, 2-hand punch style where, if he's not perfect technically, he gets that outside hand knocked down, he'll let people beat him around the corner, and then just doesn't have the redirection ability to mirror inside counters. And so I think moving him inside will protect him from a lot of the issues that he has on the outside. But, even within that, still a top 10 player for me, and I think he'll be a really good guard.
Last year, the Niners may have gotten the best offensive lineman in the entire draft in Dominic Pooney, and they got him in the 3rd round. This year, I'm looking at some guys in the 3rd round that I really like. Anthony Belton from NC State and Emory Jones from LSU. What do you think of those two guys? Is there a day 2 or day 3 offensive tackle? I mean, normally, if you want a good offensive tackle, you got to find him in the first 20 picks of the first round. It's pretty rare to find a good tackle anywhere outside of that range. But is there a day 2 or day 3 tackle that you think's good?
So I think Charles Grant out of William and Mary would be the first day 2 tackle that I would be targeting. I've got him at 46 on my board. He has like that incredible, just like prototypical frame that you look for with a tackle. It measured in with just over 34-inch arms, but the combine arm length measurements were, I think the guy messed it up this year. That's kind of been reported a lot. Like over the summer, he measured in with 35-something-inch arms. He's got a prototypical frame, extremely athletic, and fits an outside zone system. It's hard because, he's just, going up against future 33rd team riders with the level of competition that he was playing. So never was really challenged in pass pro, and so that'll be a little bit of a projection there, but I think he can be an immediate positive contributor in the run game. The other guy that's probably more late day 2, early day 3 would be Logan Brown out of Kansas. Former 5-star recruit, had some injuries early in his career at Washington, transferred to Kansas, and this was his first year like fully getting playing time. But another guy with a long athletic frame, just a gifted athlete that I think is one of the best run blockers in this class. He can drive people off the line of scrimmage. He can pull to the second and third level and eliminate safeties and DBs, and really, really good zone blocker. And I don't think he's a slouch in pass pro either. So I think Logan Brown out of Kansas is one of the most underrated offensive linemen in this class to me.
We're talking to James Foster from the 33rd team, and as you guys can tell, if you know your stuff, he knows his stuff. I can attest to that. Let's talk about the big war daddies on the defensive line, because, the Niners may go 3 defensive tackles. They're gutted at that spot. They said goodbye to Hargrave. They've moved on from some guys, and I think this is a spectacular defensive tackle draft. I love Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan. I think those are my 2 favorite guys. If the Niners wind up with either one of those guys, especially if they could trade back from 11 and still get them, I think that would be how I'd want to see them start their draft. What do you think of those 2 guys, Walter Nolan and Kenneth Grant?
I think Walter Nolan is incredibly talented. It's unfortunate that we probably won't get to see him test, but I do think he's a really good athlete. He has just incredible strike power and hand pop. Like when he makes contact with a block, it really rattles the pads and just deconstructs the block automatically. And really, really twitchy, shooting gaps, winning the edge as a pass rusher. Got to get a little bit more consistent when it comes to consistently engaging blocks in the run game. He's a little bit undersized, and so when he isn't perfect with his stack and shed technique, he can get moved back occasionally. But I think there's somebody that's incredibly disruptive and going to live in the backfield. Kenneth Grant is a really unique player because he's got the size and like frame of a nose tackle, but a lot of times kind of moves like a gap shooting 3 technique. His bull rush, when he's playing low, he can really drive blocks into the backfield. He can cross his opponent's face, win the edge with a swipe or a club, and makes a lot of plays in the backfield in the run game. I want him to get better with his technique when it comes to countering double teams. He gets moved back a lot more often than I would want a 330-pound defensive tackle to get moved back. So I don't know that he's a super clean projection as far as being a day 1 nose tackle, but definitely somebody that can be disruptive in both phases.
Okay, so I led you towards Nolan and Grant, but there's got to be 25 defensive tackles in this draft. Who are your favorites? Without me leading you, is there somebody? It doesn't have to necessarily be around one guy. Who are your favorite defensive tackles in the draft?
Yeah, for day 2 guys, like you said, it's a stacked defensive line class. What I was saying about receiver and tackle being weaker than last year, that does not apply to defensive tackle or edge. For some day 3 guys that I really like, Vernon Broughton out of Texas, I think is really under the radar, but He's got 35-inch arms. He's one of the most polished pass rushers in this class, has a ton of different moves, and, not a slouch in the run game at all either. Like he does a great job, whether it's splitting double teams or just dominating single blocks. Texas has kind of become a defensive tackle factory, and I got to his tape really late, but from now on I'm just going to start watching those guys, Texas defensive linemen, before I watch anyone else. So I would say Vernon Broughton, and then also C.J. West out of Indiana is another kind of played nose tackle for Indiana, and like almost single-handedly led them to being one of the best run defenses in college football. But he's got a quick first step. He has really forceful, powerful hands, and he can give you some as a pass rusher as well. So I think that he can kind of play a bunch of different roles for you across your defensive line. And then, I mean, there's so many guys that don't even have time to mention. Jamari Caldwell out of Oregon, Joshua Farmer out of Florida State, Shamar Turner out of Texas A&M. It's a very stacked class for sure.
No question. Niner fans, I think, are dreaming that Abdul Carter miraculously falls to 11. Now, he does have a foot problem, and who knows? He may fall in the draft. He's a blue-chip player. Reminds a lot of people of Micah Parsons. 6'2", 250 pounds. He's probably going, top 3. But how serious is the Abdul Carter stress reaction in the foot? Is there any chance he falls down? If not, who's your favorite edge rusher outside of Carter? You like Shamar Stewart? You like Mikael Williams, Mike Green, Ezaraku, Pierce, Scorton, Uma Malian, Landon Jackson? I mean, there's a lot of dudes here too.
Yeah, the stress fracture for Abdul Carter, to me, it was enough to move him from 1 to 2 on my board behind Travis Hunter, but it would definitely surprise me if he was there for San Francisco. Obviously, if he is, you're running that card in. So I've got a huge logjam on my board with the top edge rushers. I've got Shamar Stewart, Mike Green, Mikael Williams, Donovan Ezaraku, and Jalen Walker, all right next to each other from 16 to 20. And obviously they're different players, but I think they're so similar just in terms of the quality of player and the grade that I have on them. Shamar Stewart is obviously he's arguably the most athletic edge defender to enter the draft since Myles Garrett. He just doesn't have the technical advancement, I think, to win, as a pass rusher on day one, but gives you a pretty high floor as a run defender. Mike Green, I think I'd have a lot higher grade on him without the off-field stuff, but that is pretty concerning to me. I think that he has the most advanced most advanced overall pass rushing approach in this class. His ability to string moves together and just easily access counters when his first move gets tied up. Somebody that can win with power. He can win with inside, outside spins. Obviously has the cross chop and ghost move to attack the corner. If the interviews check out, I think he's has potential to be like one of the 10 best players in this class. Mikael Williams is kind of the classic Georgia defender who's just so technically sound against the run, doesn't really have it all put together as a pass rusher. I do think he's a step ahead of Shamar Stewart. Those two kind of get lumped together in a lot of ways. I think he's a step ahead as far as his moveset and his pass rushing technique, but he is a step behind Stewart as an athlete, and I'm not sure he really has the bend to win the outside track. Donovan Ezaraku, kind of the opposite player, where he, I think, is one of the bendiest and most flexible players in this class, and led Power 4 in sacks and run stops. But my biggest concern with him is that you hardly ever see him win with power on tape, and that might kind of limit him to being a really good number 2, because the best guys, they can win with power, but they can also threaten speed as well.
Do you like Oladejo from UCLA? And the Niners really seem to like him. He was a stack backer until recently, but man, what a year he had for the Bruins. And then he went to Mobile and really lit it up. Do you like Olufemi?
Yeah, I have him 61 on my board, which is a lot higher than consensus. I think just the level of technical advancement that he was able to show for being so new to the position is incredibly promising. At this point, he really just has a cross chop. Like, that's the only way you see him consistently win on tape. But if he can expand his arsenal, add a couple more moves, he's got the athleticism, really high effort and sturdy player against the run. I'm a big fan of his tape. I think, like, I'll see 7-round mock drafts that have him going day 3, and I think that's just ridiculous. To me, there's no way he gets out of day 2.
James, last one for you. We appreciate your time. James Foster with us from the 33rd team as we talk NFL draft. Who do you have the Niners picking at 11? Who's John Lynch going to be choosing between? What are they debating? What prospects will they be debating in their war room about as the clock ticks?
Well, I think if Armand Mimbo is available, to me that would be the absolute best case scenario for the Niners. If I was doing it, I would definitely consider Burden there, but just kind of reading the tea leaves, it seems like the NFL is not quite as high on him. So that might not be as realistic. But then I think also like Shamar Stewart, Mike Green, or Mykel Williams could definitely be in play. But, yeah, my first pick would be Armand Mimbo for sure.
Wow. And I got to ask you, on the way out the door, Teddy Buchanan went to my high school. He's a St. Ignatius Wildcat, former UC Davis Aggie, and now a 1 year at Cal. Buchanan, to me, it's a great group of day 3 linebackers. I really like Buchanan. What do you think of him?
I'm glad you mentioned him. So I watched Teddy Buchanan's tape really early, and I remember I wrote an article, and he was like number 1 on my biggest sleepers in this class. He's one of the smartest players in this class in pass coverage, and I went back and watched some of his tape at UC Davis, and like his reel of interceptions and pass breakups was incredible. At Cal, he didn't have quite as much ball production, but still just incredibly smart in terms of, being able to backpedal, watch the quarterback, but understand how routes are developing behind him, and then really productive in the run game. So, yeah, he fits the mold of the kind of linebacker that goes 5th or 6th round and ends up starting for 8 years.
Oh, he looked great. I saw him in the Auburn game. He had 11 tackles, 3 TFLs. Yeah. He had a couple sacks. He forced a fumble. I mean, it was like, dude, you got to be kidding me. This guy's everywhere. James, awesome stuff, man. Tell people if they want to get a hold of everything. You got a great database. If people don't follow you, they should on X, because I think some of the stuff that you're putting out there is really, really good. It's at No Flags Film on X. You can follow James Foster. But, James, tell people a little bit about what you're putting out there and what they can expect to find if they go looking for it.
Yeah, you can. If you see it on my X account, it's the pinned tweet, and I've got my draft board with over 300 players graded. I've programmed it as kind of a web application, and I've got full scouting reports, athletic testing, and percentiles. I've got like a consensus board with plots that show how they change over time, and then individual player ratings for each position. So, like for a linebacker, I've got block shedding, play recognition, zone coverage, a ton of different stuff. So I think it's one of the best resources on the internet, and devote a lot of time into producing it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, dude. Keep it rolling. Thanks for jumping on KMBR tonight to break it all down. Hopefully we'll do it again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
James Foster, NFL draft analyst from the 33rd team. And once again, he's a great follow on X at No Flags Film. And his database is extensive. And you can tell these guys have put a lot of man hours into preparing all their draft data. And if you're looking for it with the draft coming up in a month, man, that is the place to check it out. The 33rd team at No Flags Film on X.